All right, all right, all right. All right, all right, all right. I say, kind of get it. All right, all right, all right. All the people here, I say, all right, all right, all right. Hey, it's Matthew McConaughey here. Just say, hey there, all right, all right, all right. Yep, we are live. Just checking. Yep, it's working all right. All right, let's see if more people willing to join in. And you never know. You may never know. People may join in. They may not. This could happen. This may not happen. Anyway, let's start off with some Matthew McConaughey. So I went to see this here film called Dune. Dune's a mighty film. All right, all right, all right. You know, I went to space. Everyone's going to space. I did some good fun and time travel. Time travel is a good gift from Almighty God. Almighty, all right, all right. And so this here fancy film set in the big desert planet where everyone's going after this drug they call spice. It's like cocaine, except it's more cinnamon flavored. All right, all right, all right. And then there's this family called the Atreides. Yeah, the Atreides. They go try to get this spice and rule over Arrakis. All right, all right, all right. They meet these Freeman people. Now, I'm not talking Morgan Freeman, but maybe they're relatives of Morgan Freeman. All right, all right, all right. Then you got these pale guys who try to come in and ruin everything. And so part two comes out, and it's all about this scrawny guy who tries making out with Spider Man's girlfriend, who in turn has also been making out with that guy from Iron Claw. All right, all right, all right. Man, Zendaya's been making out with lots of people, Zac Efron and Peter Parker, and now the scrawny guy who's like a mouse guy. All right, all right, all right. And so there's this big conflict going on in Arrakis, and it's a story of how mouse scrawny guy eventually finds the power again. All right, all right, all right. Wow, what a movie! What a movie was Dune Part 2. There were these two kangaroo mice that fell into a bucket of cream. One mouse was so white, he made Michael Jackson look like Zendaya. And the other mouse was so scrawny, he might as well be a mouse. Wow. You know, they literally call him a mouse. Timothy Chalamet, he's a mouse. He's a mouse man. He's a mouse man, and in the movie they call him Mouse. Whoa. And so this mouse does not drown in a bucket of cream because there's little to no cream or an Arrakis. How do they get the calcium to grow? I suppose there's very little milk in Arrakis. They must have milk supplies over in Arrakis. Arrakis can't be too desolate. It can't be completely devoid of all life, you know. Because, you know, Christopher Walken is the Emperor in this movie. And this movie is quite the handfold whenever Walken starts walking on the scene, even if he has very little screen time. As you know, these mice fight in the bucket of cream, which isn't really a bucket of cream, it's the planet Arrakis. And the ice is not going to break because there's no ice to be had in Arrakis. It's a desert planet, which isn't very nice to have no ice over at the planet Arrakis. It's just a big desert planet. It's just, wow, it's a big desert planet. So it's the story of how a mouse guy eventually gets into the warfare of the people, eventually wins them over. So yeah, I recently got to see Dune Part 2. And wow, it was quite an epic film. I have actually read the first half of the Dune movie. I read the first half of the Dune movie. No, that would imply I read the script. No, I've read the first half of the Dune book. One of my regrets is that I should have taken the time to read the second half of that Dune book, but it's so big. It's so big to read. It's like a really hard book to read, but hey, I at least managed to finish Crime and Punishment. And by that, I mean I finished listening to an audiobook. Hey, at least I know the story now. I don't know if anyone else is bothering to come in here. Maybe I should just do. I don't think anyone else is gonna bother hopping in here. You know what? For what it's worth, might as well do some more self-promotionary stuff. Self-promotionary stuff. So I'm noticing other things. Let's see if I can get someone in here. So first, no. Don't bother coming in here. But you know what? It's for what it's worth. For what it's worth. In fact, I wonder if. So I'm just trying to get people on here because it's fun that way. I wanted to do something like this again. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see who else I could potentially get in here. Who else would want to watch this? Who'd want to watch this, huh? Who'd want to watch this 6'5" Scottish weirdo talking about movies, huh? Come on, bring it on. Bring it on. I think I'll try this over here because I think they showed interest. Wait a little bit. I should have done all this prior to this, but hey, who wants to join me? Might as well talk about Dune and just see where it goes from there. Anyway, I enjoyed the Dune movies. For the longest time, the Dune movies were the kind of movies where people said it was impossible to adapt because the book itself was so immense and there was so much spectacle that had to be achieved. There have been various attempts. There's been a movie, a classic movie before. Was it made by David Lynch? That was quite goofy. But hey, at least they tried. There was a mini series which I hear was quite decent. I'll probably need to check that out. But in terms of a full-on filmmaking adaptation of Dune, I've heard that this series made by Dennis. Sorry, just let me look up the director's name and I want to pronounce it properly. Villeneuve. I think that's his name. Denis Villeneuve. Yes. Denis Villeneuve, the same director who made Blade Runner 2000, the Blade Runner sequel. He's done really well with the Dune movies. Like they are a visual spectacle. They look amazing. They use CGI sparingly, and it's definitely very engaging with the amount of world building that it does, as well as all the themes that are put into play. Yeah, people are gonna inevitably have their little nitpicks that it didn't quite 100% follow the book pinpoint precisely, but I mean, from as far as I'm aware, it's a very faithful adaptation, and for what it's worth, it works on the screen. And having seen part 2, I'd say it does wrap up the loose ends mostly. There is room for more material to go. I heard they're gonna make like a Benny Gesserit spin-off series, and there may be like a sequel to come along. But honestly, I'm quite satisfied with Dune Part One and Part Two as is. If they made no more Dune movies from this particular franchise, I'd be quite happy because Part Two, even though it ends on kind of an ominous note, I'd say it ends right at a thematically appropriate point in the context of that film, where the themes of geopolitical strife are made more emphasized in the fact emphasizing that, oh no, the geopolitical warfare is going to keep repeating itself. And don't worry, I'm not going to give anything away in case you're wondering. So feel free to come on in. I should have titled this non-spoiler. In fact, I'll put this in the chat. Non-spoilers. You're welcome. So, it's going to be quite the film. Indeed, it's going to be quite the film with two mice fighting for geopolitical control and Christopher Walken being the emperor. A quick recap. So Dune is this big epic sci-fi story authored by Frank Herbert. No, not Herbert the pervert from Family Guy. Frank Herbert, the author, who is primarily known for making the Dune series and many other books, and other people have made sequels to the Dune series, carrying on the sort of geopolitical themes that the series was going for. But primarily speaking, this series is based on Frank Herbert. Take my word with a grain of salt. I am not an absolute expert on Frank Herbert, but I'm working off from what I know. I know that Frank Herbert was some kind of a reporter, and that this series is essentially based on his experience as a reporter going around the world and all these different experiences. It's almost like he's making a report of his own fictional world. Yeah, I mean, you just gotta love science fiction and the potential that fantasy has to drag you to another world. Like you got the Narnia series, you got the Pilgrim's Progress, all those great stories, and with Dune, you got some fascinating insights of a weird merging between the future and the past, where it's set in the distant future, but it's very clever in how it's set in the future, kind of emphasizing the fact that history repeats itself, which is a very clever observation that Frank Herbert made. He's very cleverly set up this future that it's technologically extremely advanced, and yet at the same time, there's some aspects to how the society works and the way the weapons are used, which could arguably be more primitive. Because you have this whole shield system, for example, where they put on a shield, bang, whoom, and they become invulnerable to all fast attacks because the shield makes sure that it will repel all objects that are way too fast, to the point where if you try to shoot a shield user with a speedy bullet, you'd pretty much create a nuke. So the way to defeat the shield person is up close and do it slowly, or use some kind of sleeping dart that does it slowly, penetrates through the shield. So it's like stuff like that, as well as other stuff like that. It's kind of cleverly handled. So this is a story about these different factions in space, all competing for this highly valuable substance on a desert planet of Atticus. And on this desert planet Atticus, there is a substance called spice. Spice is this sort of colored sand substance, which, if consumed or inhaled, it allows the user to have these enhanced senses, and people have used these senses to enhance their capacity for like supernatural prophecy and for pinpoint space travel to avoid like asteroids. And so it's a very highly valued resource, and all these different factions are competing for it. You got the local Fremen who live on the desert planet. You have the House Atreides, where our main protagonist resides, and the Harkonnens, My sister noted that the Harkonnens was a very deliberate evil vampire name. In fact, the main villain is even called Vladimir Harkonnen. Vampire symbolism? Where would you get that from? So they're all competing for the spice, and the Duke Leto Atreides is invited by the Emperor to go to the planet, but he realizes this is most likely a trap, but he's going anyway for the dignity of the house. I guess the Emperor and his powerful house is another faction. Oh yeah, there's another faction at play called the Bene Gesserit, which is like this witch cult that basically puppet strings all the more powerful factions. So, like that puppet strings. Was that really a description count? That puppet strings people. That puppet strings. The correct term would be using people as puppet, not puppet strings people. Who uses that term? So the Atreides go there, they greet the local Fremen, but tragically they get attacked by the Harkonnens. But Paul Atreides and his mum, they escape. They meet up with the local Fremen, and Paul vows for vengeance against the Harkonnens. And there's all kinds of stuff, and, like the Emperor's getting involved, and the Emperor is portrayed by Christopher Walken, and this is that's basically just a brief catch up on where part one is. I remember when the first part came out, it was really fascinating in that it was definitely engaging, not in the sense that it was necessarily fun, but that it was definitely engaging because there were certain themes at play, as well as a kind of story that like, you know, there were truths in the narrative, and certain ways that the story was approached that made it feel authentic. You know, the way the characters interact with each other, and the way things were at play, and it seemed to gravitate people's attention. And when Dune came out, it was definitely one of the best films of that year. Like, is it as great as like Lord of the Rings or something? Probably not, but it's definitely a very interesting take on the sci-fi genre. It's caught my attention with the kind of discussions that themes that this sort of thing could raise. Yeah, I think it's genuinely worth a watch, if anything but for that. And someone join me, please. I like it when people are on the chat. Come on, join me, somebody join me. So promotion. Yeah, I might as well do it because. So how do I review Dune Part 2 in a way that doesn't spoil anything? Well, just given how no one's here at the moment, I could just spoil anything I want and just get away with it. Hold on. Hold on a minute. Sorry. I think I made a bit of an error. Link. Here we go. So promotion. That's better. What the? Oh, never mind. I was trying to do something, but it didn't quite work. Never mind. Might as well try it. Anyway, might as well get back on topic. With the film, with Dune Part 2, it leaves off from where we end off, and I find it very interesting in that it's not a typical sci-fi story. Like, it's obviously very different from Star Wars or a lot of films you'd be used to. um, because it doesn't offer the typical happy ending that you'd expect from the sort of thing. It's yeah, there is a sort of good versus evil narrative in there, but it's implied that there's some darkness within some of our main characters as well. Um, basically, Frank Herbert has this this very Frank Herbert has this specific kind of view on religion where and yeah, religion does play a vital part in the plot of the Dune series. Um, he views religion not necessarily as something that could lead to objective truth, but as something that can be useful. I think from what I know of Frank Herbert, that's the way he perceives religion. It definitely comes across in the stories that he creates. Although it seems that Frank Herbert was, to my knowledge, trying to promote some kind of universalist kind of spirituality. In the Dune novels, there is this book that's very explicitly mentioned, which is entitled The Orange Catholic Bible, which essentially combines the belief systems of the Abrahamic religions with Buddhism and other things like that for a very man-centered kind of lifestyle where you have to like go with the flow of your environments and be dedicated to some kind of higher cause. That's the impression I'm getting. I haven't read like the Orange Catholic Bible other than maybe other resources that I've studied and Dune as well. So anyone who's an expert on that kind of topic, please let me know in the comments down below. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. But regardless, the reason why religion is such a crucial role in the Dune series is because there's these prophecies involved, and the Dune stories have this heavily geopolitical based plot. The plot is very geopolitically driven, so that every choice that the major characters make, it's mainly for the sake of power and how they can advance their power. The main people who are pulling all the strings are the Bene Gesserit, who are this sort of witch cult, and the second part seems to claim that these witches don't really desire anything. They just seek power, which seems like a very subverted version of Buddhism. Now that I think about it, eliminate desire, but they want power. Whatever happened to no desire? If you don't want any desire, then why do you desire to geopolitically control people? What would be the point? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Look, when I notice these contradictions, I'm gonna point them out. I'm going to point them out. So the Bene Gesserit, for like power-seeking reasons, they give certain information to the Baron Harkonnen and to the Emperor and to the House Atreides. In fact, in the first part, it's made clear that Leto Atreides was permitted by, well, allowed by the Bene Gesserit to have one member of the Bene Gesserit become the wife. Yeah, the Bene Gesserit's a strictly female group. The Bene Gesserit had one female of their group marry with Leto Atreides. I think the second part even indicated that they deliberately lure people into sex so that they can have more people in the cult, which reminds me of this one scene on his video that I saw a while back where they were inventing the neck twisters. And then there was one joke that they made where they said, "I'm searching for a mate. There are no females here. You will have to look elsewhere to repopulate the race." So yeah, with these one gender cults, the tactic that they'd often use to repopulate themselves is to sneak up on other people. Like this applies to like men and women, but as far as like pop culture is concerned, it's usually mainly the women only cults, which is curious. I think this kind of story's been done with like the Amazonians from the Wonder Woman stories. There was this one comic book from the Wonder Woman stories where it's revealed that the Amazonians repopulate by sneaking up on other sailors, a la siren mermaid style, and then they mate with them and then kill off the men, which is kind of ominous. So the Bene Gesserit have a very similar tactic where they have their own members lure people into sex so that they can have more children. And to their surprise, they've had one of their members in the Atreides group give birth to a son. This was not part of their plan. However, the Fremen of the planet Arrakis see this male Bene Gesserit member as some part of this elaborate prophecy. And once this elaborate prophecy is fulfilled, then the paradise that they're seeking for is going to be promised. So there's this power that the Bene Gesserit have called the Voice, which most likely influenced George Lucas when he was inventing the Force from Star Wars. The Voice is like this sort of big, echoing kind of voice, which has supernatural implications, and whenever people hear it, they kind of obey what the voice implies. So Paul is learning how to use this ability, and Paul is learning about his responsibilities as a leader and his responsibilities of taking ownership of the planet Arrakis and what impact that's going to have on the rest of the galaxy. So the fictional story of Dune goes on so that Paul and the rest of the Atreides go to meet the Fremen, and they're getting accustomed to the planet, how it works, and how spice is heavily guarded by the famous gigantic sandworms that follow echolocation if too much of a rhythm is established on the surface. And they sadly get invaded by the Harkonnens. And Paul and his mom get away, but sadly their father, Leto Atreides, sacrificed himself in the process. So when we leave off on number 2, Paul and his mom are starting to fight back. And Paul is noticing the full implications of these prophecies. And what part 2 delves more into is that I find part 2 quite interesting is in that it's less of a big action spectacle and more of a intense geopolitical drama, which I find to be a very interesting take on sci-fi. So in this film, Paul, whether he believes these prophecies are legit or not, and there's various divisions on whether these prophecies are legit or not, Paul is taking advantage of these prophecies because he's in it for vengeance. He wants vengeance to get these people, but at the same time, he's kind of conflicted about his fear of getting too much power and how that could corrupt him. And eventually, he kind of does get corrupted by power. And without giving too much away, there's compromises of a relationship he sees that he has to make in order to increase in power, and he sends out these warnings to the other galaxies. It's kind of as if the closer you get to like the king of the hill, as it were, the more the power could threaten to corrupt. They say that like absolute power corrupts, and I'm sure there's benevolent leaders who can handle that kind of power, but given this topic of this film, I would imagine that handling that kind of power is tricky. It's very tricky to handle that kind of absolute power. And I don't know if any of you have actually read the Dune books or even seen Dune Part 2. Let me know if you've actually seen Dune Part 2. I'd be curious to have a conversation. I'm trying to keep it non-spoiler as possible, but if you want to spoil it, like, go ahead. But having seen Dune Part 2, I find it really interesting that there's various things that come at play, and it's very much a drama about power and about the joy of taking back certain freedom, but there's also this danger of how power can corrupt over time, and how power can make us lose relationships that we previously had, and even if we have the best of intentions, absolute power can have dangerous implications. I find that kind of topic like really fascinating, honestly. And I find it even more fascinating that the story is kind of ballsy enough to even tackle religious topics in the first place. And obviously, like with the source reference that Frank Herbert refers to as the Orange Catholic Bible, there's many different ways that people could go into this film and interpret it. They could interpret it from like a Christian standpoint, an Islamic standpoint, a Buddhist standpoint, Jewish standpoint. But I mean, inevitably there's going to be some clashes in opinion because it's the Orange Catholic Bible. It by default has a clash of different ideologies and opinions. But obviously people can look at it and have definitely have Islamic vibes from the way people sort of bow and sort of, do these sort of motions, like similar to like the Islamic people. I've actually looked into Islam myself. Fun fact: Islam, the word Islam itself, is Islamic. As in Islam, Islam is an Arabic word that means submit. The religion itself literally has submit in its title. And Islam itself is a very geopolitically driven religion. And I think some of that definitely comes across in the narrative of Dune. The way they value, how do I put this? The way they value taking back certain land, and the way they value like glory in battle and martyrdom, even that kind of deal. There's definitely various aspects of that, and there's also maybe some aspects of Buddhism of like letting go of desire. But obviously, there's clashes and conflicts. But basically, on the whole, there's obviously like some kind of religious belief throughout the narrative of the film. And even I find it interesting that even in the, and I guess this goes back to Frank Herbert's sense of reporting and that his observation of people's clashing opinions, even within people of the same side, that even when people follow these particular religious beliefs, there's, I find it interesting that even the film itself says, okay, well, even though the Fremen as a whole are people who believe in defending the planet Arrakis, there are some who fundamentally believe that the prophecies will 100% come true, and they're referred to as the fundamentalists. And yeah, that's very much true of real life. And there's others who are a bit more skeptical, but they're still willing to believe that some kind of savior figure is going to come according to their religious beliefs, just not yet. But here comes Paul, and even Paul's feeling kind of conflicted about what this geopolitical power could do to him over time, about his own thoughts on whether these prophecies are legitimately true or not. But whether Paul believes them or not, he's fulfilling them anyway. Like, part of it's deliberate because of his pursuit to gain more followers and gain more influences, to gather a force that's so overwhelming. He beats the Harkonnens with ease. I guess it's going into spoiler territory, but I find it interesting how it's more of a geopolitical drama more than an action spectacle. Because if this was more of an action spectacle, akin to like, I don't know, like Star Wars or Star Trek, there would definitely be a clash on, oh, who's gonna win, who's gonna win. But the battle, because it's a geopolitical drama, there's more of an emphasis on strategy and gathering numbers and gathering power, to the point where you see Paul get the power. So when he reaches that point when he defeats his enemies with relative ease, comparatively speaking, it makes sense. And it makes sense that whilst there is a struggle, the bad guys, the Harkonnens, don't seem like they put up much of a fight. I mean, obviously they did overwhelm the Atreides by nearly wiping out the entire Atreides house in part one. Yeah, you got that. And so this is like Paul Atreides fighting back. But I find it interesting in a way that, I mean, some people could view like the final like battle scene as, oh, this is kind of anticlimactic because the bad guys didn't put much of a fight at all. But I actually find it really interesting on a thematic basis, because it shows that Paul has reached a very specific status and power where he's able to wipe out his enemies with like relative ease, and we see how the power is affecting Paul and the conflict he's having, and he even expresses himself, like even to like the Josh Brolin character, like, what, are you afraid of like losing power? No, I'm afraid of gaining power. Like Paul is afraid of being worshipped because he's afraid of the damage he could do, and he he makes out with Spider-Man's girlfriend. But it's implied that he might even have to compromise on that if he wants to increase in his absolute power of like the entire galaxy. And so that paints Paul in a bit of a gray light. Sorry, I'm just centering my camera. It paints Paul in a kind of a gray light, and I find, yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating to me that the story is able to delve into the sort of topic matter and give a cautionary story on where we ought to place our beliefs, and assessing if it's really true, and the cautionary danger of getting too much power. I think that's the thematic that Dune Part 2 is aiming for, and it nails that thematic. It's Dune Part 2, and I guess the Dune franchise as a whole, is a cautionary story on the dangers on what geopolitical power can do to a person. So, and I guess it's further emphasized by the fact that the acts of certain characters in the narrative, like almost everything they do it for power. Everything the Bene Gesserit do it for power. They even say they don't seek what they desire, they seek power. The Emperor wants to stay in power. The Baron has these nephews and like sons and stuff like that for the sake of power. He views his nephews like birthday gladiator arena, which was quite the visual spectacle, because he's in it for power. His nephew's in it for power. There's a scene, without giving too much away, there's a scene where a certain character is dying, and one of the last things he literally does is crawl up towards the throne that the Emperor is currently not occupying. He's just like, even in his dying moments, he is that desperate to attain power. He will literally crawl up with his dying breath just to get a chance to sit on the throne. Like, these characters are absolutely dedicated to geopolitical power, like more so than anything. Like, whether these characters, like their families, their romantic lives, their freedom fightings, like their end goal is primarily for geopolitical power. And Frank Herbert is probably presenting this to us from his experience as a reporter, because everyone, from Frank Herbert's perspective, is seeking power. And Frank Herbert is noting, well, this geopolitical power has the possibility to corrupt. And I've heard, like, in later Dune stories authored by Frank Herbert and later on other people who carried on with Dune sequels, Paul Atreides, if I remember this correctly, becomes the villain. And so the children of Dune have to stop Paul. So it's kind of an interesting drama. I find it interesting when science fiction is able to delve into religious topics in a very thought-provoking manner. I kind of liked how the Halo video game series did it, especially with Halo 2. Especially given how how that franchise established how these organized religious societies were meant to be made to seek the truth. But when people compromise on seeking the truth, but seek power instead, there's going to be disastrous consequences. So because the quote-unquote prophets from the Halo franchise were seeking power rather than actual truth, their society of high charity and eventually fell to the flood. And the flood parasite in that franchise represents sin. The grave mind even says it itself. I am the monument to all your sins. And the Arbiter becomes like the repentant person who joins the Christ figure that is like the Master Chief. Yeah, that's another thing. Paul Atreides himself could be viewed as like this sort of Christ figure. Although obviously Paul Atreides is not going to be a perfect Christ figure, because there's some dark implications of everything I've just mentioned about the geopolitical power corruption that's at play in the drama of the life of Paul Atreides. And yeah, you can definitely have these sort of superficial aspects, like, yeah, Paul Atreides he's the prophesied Messiah that people have been waiting for. Yeah, you could point to that, or the other superficial comparison that, Paul wanders in the desert just like Jesus did whenever he was going through his trials and tribulations, or like you could point to like, he does miraculous stuff, it's not overtly miraculous, but I suppose with the spice, Paul has these enhanced senses, and Paul has this ability to like prophesy, albeit from like the witch cult that is the Bene Gesserit, rather than from direct divine interplay. Although there could be some grace of divine prophecy involved, but the Christian Bible says that that just because you have the ability to prophesy, that doesn't guarantee you'll get a spot in heaven. Because there's even a Bible verse that says Lord, didn't we prophesy? Didn't we do this? Didn't we have these supernatural gifts? And then Jesus said, away from me, I never knew you. The whole point of that verse is to say that just because you have these supernatural gifts that come from the divine authority himself, that doesn't guarantee a spot in heaven. Why? Because the whole point of salvation in the Christian view is to get to know God personally. And getting to know God personally is all about love. It's all about grace. It's all about helping other people. It's all about sacrificing power that would be convenient to yourself in exchange for loving other people. So Paul Atreides does not fit that kind of role at all. Instead, Paul is trying to gain that kind of geopolitical power. It could be argued that Paul would be the exact kind of person who could arguably bow to the devil himself in order to get land. Maybe, but I guess that's up for debate. It's interesting how Frank Herbert emphasized a lot on how geopolitical power corrupts, and he emphasized so much on how everything the characters do, it's for the sake of power, and how power can corrupt. I heard that J.R.R. Tolkien himself got the chance to read the Dune books, or more precisely, the Dune book. Tolkien did read it, but he didn't like it. It's kind of interesting to me that Tolkien didn't like Dune. According to what we can research, we don't have much source material to elaborate on why Tolkien would express such opinions. But I think given Tolkien's thematics in The Lord of the Rings, I think it makes perfect sense why Tolkien doesn't really like Frank Herbert's Dune. I think, didn't Tolkien say like he was impressed with like the effort put into it, but he ultimately didn't like it? Something like that. He's kind of polite that way. Because in Tolkien stories, Tolkien is criticizing power. Tolkien is absolutely criticizing geopolitical power for the sake of it. He criticizes the pursuit of power through characters like Sauron, Saruman, Gollum, Denethor, even Boromir in many ways. Other characters. Thorin Oakenshield when he goes mad with the dragon sickness. Smaug, the dragon. Other characters that represent corrupted. The Nazgul. Yes, the Nazgul. Perfect. Yes, the Nazgul. I think the Nazgul perfectly represent Tolkien's critique of power. It's established in Tolkien's lore of Middle-earth that Sauron tricked all the races into having these rings of power. We are not going to talk about the Amazon show. The less we talk about that, the better. So anyway, I like in the lore of like Tolkien's Middle Earth, like God, who's named Iluvatar, like he creates Middle Earth. The angels like collaborate in like making the elves, the dwarves, the hobbits, and so on and so forth. But then Melkor, the devil figure, like he rebels against the song and harmony of Iluvatar, and so Melkor goes to create his agent Sauron, and Sauron disguises himself as a fair elf, and Sauron manages to collaborate in making like these rings of power. There's even a poem about the rings. Let's see if I remember this correctly. 3 were given to the elves, 7 were given to the dwarves, 9 for mortal men doomed to die. And then Sauron made 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. And those 9 rings for the men, they were given to kings, specifically, as the story describes, to men who above all else desired power. Men are portrayed as more easily persuade than most kinds of people into being corrupted to power. Although, these 9 kings, these 9 human kings were beloved people, but they got so consumed with power, they literally became these like demonic hooded creatures that are neither living nor dead, and they're staying loyal to Sauron for the sake of gaining the power. And Sauron has this absolute power through the One Ring. This One Ring gives Sauron all this power, and Sauron is this sort of Ubermensch figure. And if you're familiar with Nietzschean philosophy, Nietzsche talked about how like without some kind of divine guidance, without the order that is affiliated with religious organization, then we're lost. We're absolutely lost. People of varying opinions can agree that we need. Sorry, I'm saying pardon me because I farted. Various people of different backgrounds can agree that people need some kind of unifying belief to unite people together. Otherwise, things become disordered. Nietzsche recognized that, and he was noting that there was this big crisis back in his day that there was a threat that kind of order that was associated with religiously affiliated organization was gradually waning away, and that was a danger because without that kind of order, people were more likely to delve into chaos. So Nietzsche's solution was to embrace this concept he came up with called the Übermensch, this concept of this Superman figure who would go, as in his terms, beyond good and evil. Have that kind of person make up the rules. You get to decide what's right and wrong. You get to decide the rules. What Nietzsche was trying to say is that when the standard for good and evil is gone, you make up the rules for good and evil. But Tolkien and many others saw that by itself as a pursuit of power, a kind of power that could corrupt the individual over time. So that's the kind of power that Tolkien heavily criticized throughout his narratives. And the main reasons why the villains keep falling in Tolkien's narratives is primarily because Tolkien's villains keep thinking of this delusion that getting this absolute power will fix everything, but rather good is actually achieved not from gaining power, but by letting it go. So, like even Gandalf, who's, if you're actually paying attention, is defined as this angel figure in Tolkien's series. Even Gandalf had to humble himself to not touch the One Ring, because the One Ring has this thing that it corrupts people over time. And there are people who have speculated online on alternative timelines on what would happen if Gandalf actually did take the ring. It would consume Gandalf, and he would basically take over all Middle-earth because Gandalf's that overpowered. And even Gandalf himself says in the story, as you remember correctly, I would intend to use the ring for good, but through me, the ring would corrupt me. And I think there's something similar going on with like Paul Atreides here. Like, I suppose Paul's corruption to power is kind of similar to the concept of taking the One Ring of power with the intent of trying to defeat your enemies. So, yeah, I think if Paul was given the opportunity to have the One Ring, he'd probably take it. Because that kind of thing promises power, the power to conquer your enemies. But it corrupts you over time to the point where you become the very thing that you sworn to defeat. It's as Harvey Dent says in The Dark Knight, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So, I mean, I could compare Tolkien and Dune all day long, but basically that power dynamic in Dune is definitely at play. I look forward to seeing Dune Part 2 again. I think some friends have invited me to see it, so and I just wanted to see it ahead of time in case I was too busy or something like that. So I think it'll be interesting to talk about like the power dynamics with those friends, because like a lot of stories, especially in epics, well, I suppose even in mundane stuff, like revolves around like power dynamics, because in each scene you have like you have certain things to consider, like what position are the characters in, how much confidence do they have regardless of their position. Could they be very poor in a rich position? Could they be very confident in a poor position? Is there something that they know that other people don't? Or, you know, there's various aspects of like power that come into play here, and I'm sure there's various like stage rules that come into like how you visualize like power dynamics to make it clear to your audience. Yeah, I find, gosh, there's a lot to discuss in regards to power dynamics. I suppose I've perfectly summarized Dune Part 2 without giving much away. So I'm just going to move on from Dune Part 2 now and just bookend all that and just move on to the other topic I wanted to talk about, McConaughey and Poirot. Now, this is a very funny and very frustrating story. So, here at the UK, we have U Cinema. On occasion, they keep playing these films. I've already been in cinema years ago, been there, done that. But I recently had the opportunity to see Interstellar for the first time, and I kept hearing from people that Interstellar was one of those films that you just had to see on the big screen. I suppose similar to how Dune part 1 and 2 are the films that you had to see on the big screen. I would love to see the Dune movies in IMAX. I heard the music blows you back. There's even this joke video someone made of someone being pushed back by the winds from the bagpipe theme from the first part. Anyway, so talking about Interstellar, which I saw, because this is a funny story. I went to see Interstellar on the big screen. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing to see one of Christopher Nolan's science fiction film about the beauty of time travel and how love transcends even space and time, and the dangers of space travel, how lonely it can get. It's a beautiful film. Christopher Nolan is one of my favorite directors. Interstellar is a really engaging film with some very thought-provoking stuff to say about love and how time fits in with Colossians 1:16, I guess. And went in and enjoyed it, especially on the big screen. But something frustrating happened. Because you see, on the exact same evening, Eden Court Theatre was running a special event, which I missed. I had the opportunity to go to the special event, and I missed it. I couldn't watch Interstellar on any other night. I chose to watch Interstellar in the cinema because I was curious to see it, but it came at a cost. I missed the opportunity in Eden Court Theatre to see David Suchet, the man who played Poirot at Eden Court. It was at Wednesday 28th, the same day I went to see Interstellar. And Interstellar was not playing at any other time other than the exact same evening that David Suchet happened to be visiting Eden Court. I had the opportunity to see the best actor to play Poirot. This guy is legitimately cool. This guy is such a nice person, and I missed my opportunity to see him. Ah! Darn it! Darn it! Why? I saw such spectacular science fiction beauty, but at the cost of missing out on the little gray cells man himself. Why? Why do you do this to me, life? Why? So, honestly, looking back now, I'm gonna laugh at it, but at the time I just thought, darn it! But even then, it was kind of funny. So there you go. There's my funny story. As well as the fact of finding out that Matthew McConaughey was part of the story. All right. And now I'm just kind of curious. It'll be funny to imagine Matthew McConaughey talking about Dune Part 2. All right. See the scrawny guy, he's caught a mouse, and this mouse man, he goes making out with Spider-Man's girlfriend. All right. There are 2 mice in a bucket of cream. One mouse was so white, he made Michael Jackson look like Zendaya. And the other mouse man was literally called a mouse in the film, so he was pretty much a mouse. Oh, hi, Mark. And Brooks has joined us. Hello, Brooks. I was just talking about Dune Part 2, and I've just had an entire hour's worth about talking about the themes of geopolitical power in the Dune franchise without giving too much away. And I was talking about how I went to see Interstellar and Poirot only showing up to say, when can we talk? I'll wrap this up quite soon. I'll wrap this up soon. I just wanted to talk about like Dune Part 2, as well as some stuff that was happening in my personal life. I'll be with you soon. I'll wrap this up. What else were we going to talk about? Oh yeah, victim mentality. Yeah, I was at a friend's house lately, and there was this one person I was talking to. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, just for privacy reasons. But I found it fascinating that this person I was talking to was talking about how this person has to look after their children, and how there seems to be this epidemic of people in this sort of false privilege kind of mindset. This person was telling me that there are some people in the world who Avatar: Last Airbender is victim mentality with the latest live action adaptation. yeah. I've been hearing that live action adaptation's got some mixed reactions. I had the opportunity to see it, but my friend had other priorities. Yeah, the fan base. Yeah. My friend was, without giving away who it is, my friend was showing me this comedian, this Mexican stand-up comedian named Fluffy, who you can see on Netflix. And even he was talking about the negative effects of cancel culture, which was quite fascinating for me and I was paying attention to that, obviously. Like, I mean, Fluffy's kind of a funny guy. Yoo-hoo! Martin! He was talking about cancel culture, and I was bringing it up with this person I was talking to, to the two people I was talking to, and this people seem to be in this mindset where they're in such a good position, like whether they be like in a sort of minority position or getting paid by the government. And it was kind of interesting hearing about these privileged people who get paid by the government, like with the intent to support them, presumably, but they end up getting in this position where they don't really do anything. They're already comfortable enough. They have ease of access to all the things they want, so there's no motivation for them to be polite. There's no motivation for them to work hard. And it's a rather toxic position to be in. I suppose it's kind of like that big baby from Spirited Away, now that I think about it. Yeah, it's... And this person and I were talking, and this person was noting that this person and I were conversing, and we were noting how the cancel culture seems to have this negative effect, which further feeds into the sort of victim mindset, the sort of privileged mindset of not being willing to learn anything or to work hard for anything, but just be in this position to easily be offended by anything and everything, and to not bother with the hard work. Tekken Combat. Hey, guys, how are you feeling today? Not too bad today, Tekken Combat. You just missed an entire hour's worth of me talking about Dune Part 2. And now I'm just talking about something that's quite personal in my life. Feel free to watch back in the live stream for my opinions on Dune Part 2, which is spoiler-free. And also about a funny story about me watching Interstellar at the expense of missing Poirot. So as I was saying, thanks for visiting Tekken Combat. I appreciate it. This person and I were conversing, and it's kind of a shame that we live in this culture where people think they're in such privileged positions, whether they embrace the sort of victim mentality, but it doesn't really motivate them to work hard. Like, life's gonna throw stuff at you, and trials and tribulations are gonna come in. Oh, now I remember now. This person and I were talking about how there's this plague that's influencing our modern day culture, and it's the plague of instant gratification. I've heard one person talk online say that I know, I'm sorry for missing Jin part 2. it's okay. It's okay. Jin part. Jin. Jin part. Jin part 2. That's a funny name. Jin 2. Imagine if like the entire series was named like Gin, as in Gin, as in like the alcohol gin. that would be hilarious. Anyway, instant gratification is definitely a plague in today's society. I heard one person talk online say that if you were to give your children the opportunity to have either one marshmallow now or like 5 marshmallows in 3 hours, which option would they pick? They would pick one marshmallow now because they're in it for instant gratification. That's the way our young minds work. We think, mine. We want the gratification. We want the satisfaction now. Brooks said, funny enough, Amazon can be seen as instant gratification, but you wait weeks, rarely months. I suppose, to Amazon's credit, they're delaying Invincible Part 2, so there's delayed gratification, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of a shame that there's instant gratification. It gives this false promise of why work hard when you can get all the rewards you're seeking now. But the problem is, if you go for instant gratification, it doesn't really build character. I meant shipping. Oh man, I suppose if you pick free delivery, you'll learn how to delay gratification, and it saves you money if you go for free delivery, because even though you wait longer, it gives you the long-term gratification of having more money. The thing is, the reason people are so fixated on instant gratification is because they're too fixated on the short-term gain, and it's a very narrow-minded view. They never really see things in the long-term gain. Like, I suppose with Dune Part 2 that I was talking about for the past hour or so, I suppose to make it that kind of analogy, people have this short-term aim for attaining power. Like, yeah, sure, they've got to work hard to get the power, but it's arguably even harder work to get through to your enemies in a peaceful way, and it's even harder work to love people. And I think that kind of those kind of themes are made prevalent in stories like Vinland Saga, where it's easier to like try to kill off your enemies or to get angry at your enemies, but it's much more difficult to actually learn to love your enemies and to actually take it easy on yourself. Like, it's surprisingly hard to do that, but it's ultimately a more rewarding route in the long term because it leads to a more gratified mind. It's because of existential threats, mainly. Black holes can blip us out. There's existentialism to but into. I suppose the nihilism also feeds into this short-term gratification, like the sort of mentality of why bother helping the world when we can just live in the here and now, like get all the money, have all the sex, like get everything we want, like. But the problem is, like, if you don't work hard, if you don't try to work for relationships. I said Tekken wasn't Smash Ultimate and Mortal Kombat and Warner Brothers Multiverse. That's true. That is very true. Tekken wasn't Smash Ultimate. Yeah, the Kazuya character was indeed in Smash Ultimate, and Mortal Kombat is the Warner Brothers Multiverse. There's been various crossovers between Mortal Kombat and the DC universe. I think there's even. Wasn't the Mortal Kombat characters even in multiverses as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Anyway, there's like the instant gratification can be quite the plague. Like take romantic life, for example. Like, people see it as far too easy to like look at the fancy magazines or like take a look at naked people and go, ah, yeah, that's the instant gratification I want. But that sort of thing doesn't really give you the long-term gratification of the nurture that people are seeking deep down inside. Because deep down inside, we're all social beings and we were not designed to be alone. So if you're lusting after people, then you're only doing it for the short-term gratification, but there's no reward in that. Yeah, sure, you feel good right in the moment, but in the long term, you'll feel empty. So you try to do it again and again and again, but nothing. Like, sure, the short-term gain of just lusting after people will grant you like the short-term gratification of not having to work hard through the risk of breakup and the risk of being shamed upon in a relationship. But if you're not going to bother with attempting relationships in the first place, then you're going to be quite a shallow individual. It takes harder work to actually learn to love people and to learn to understand people's struggles, and harder work to open up your vulnerable side, to let a potential romantic partner see every part of you, both good, bad, and the ugly. But in the long term, once you find that success, it's a lot more rewarding. The sex involved with a real intimate partner is the gratification of the long term. So I guess that's the best example I can think of when it comes to short term versus long term. And sadly, we live in a culture where they just don't understand that anymore, because especially with like TikTok and other things like that, it's not that these platforms or technologies, it's not that they're bad in and of themselves. It's just that they have the chance to insert Lord of the Rings. You know what, Brooks? Quote. Yeah. Yeah. I think I know the one. Your evil cannot create, it can only destroy. I think that's the quote you're going to put in there, Brooks. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I was literally comparing the Lord of the Rings with Dune earlier. I think it's been made known online that Tolkien actually got the chance to read Dune and he didn't really like it. I think Tolkien was impressed with the effort put into it, but he didn't really like it. And if you compare the quote by Elrond, yeah, if you compare the themes between Frank Herbert in Dune and Tolkien's in Lord of the Rings, these two men have drastically different opinions about power. I mean, both men can agree that absolute geopolitical power tends to corrupt people over time, but where the disagreement is in how the outcome of life is. So according to Frank Herbert, life seems to be this sort of never-ending cycle of this struggle for absolute geopolitical power. But for Tolkien, this kind of power can be defeated. Well, I'll explain why that's so funny later. Yeah. So for Tolkien, absolute power can be conquered. Actually, the kind of power that Frank Herbert was cautioning us about. Frank Herbert suggested, oh well, this search for geopolitical power, it's an inevitable part of life, and it's part of the tragedy of being a human being. But here's where Tolkien says, no, that kind of power can actually be conquered. How can it be conquered? You just let it go. You like notice how the heroic characters in Tolkien stories overcome power not by attaining it, but by letting it go. Look into neo-medievalism. Yeah. You're referring to the fact that Pilgrim's Pass was mentioning medievalism in that one cyberpunk video he made, where cyberpunk will destroy nationalism and globalism. That's a fascinating video. Pilgrim's Pass has very fascinating observations about political power and how that works. I still don't get the concept, which just goes to show how reliable Pilgrim's Pass is. Yeah. Even I'm still learning it. Yeah. I suppose Tolkien understood medievalism, and Tolkien was deeply a lover of myths and particularly the stories of how good overcomes evil. And Tolkien noted how, especially given that Tolkien was a survivor of the war, that he noticed the influence that power has, and that in Tolkien's narratives, power is defeated not by attaining it, but by letting it go. And it's kind of interesting. Even in the Peter Jackson films, like even when there's creative liberties being taken, Peter Jackson still wanted to be true to what Tolkien believed in. So even with the Hobbit trilogy, even though that's got a lot of creative liberties, you can still see Tolkien's philosophy shine through, especially with the scene where Gandalf's having an exchange with Galadriel, where Galadriel says to Gandalf, "Why the halfling?" And it's a really inspiring scene where Gandalf says, "I don't know. Saruman believes that it is power that keeps the darkness at bay, but that is not what I've found. I find that defeating darkness is actually in the small things. It's in kindness and love and charity." Why Bilbo Baggins? Maybe it's because I'm afraid and he gives me courage. And so why is it that of all the races in Tolkien's narratives, why is it always the hobbits that win the day? Because they're the most humble creatures. Because the hobbits are the ones that value the most simple yet most beautiful things in life. It's the hobbits that are the most humble creatures. Yeah. Although not even the hobbits are safe from the risk of absolute power. Gollum, who was formerly a hobbit named Smeagol, albeit a hobbit of a different kind, but still hobbit. Smeagol got corrupted, and even his brother or cousin Deagle got corrupted as well before Smeagol strangled Deagle to death. And then Smeagol got carried away with the pranks. And then, but it's kind of interesting that even when Smeagol gets this tool for absolute power, Smeagol doesn't really use it to like take over kingdoms. Like he uses it to hide and to skulk in the shadows and to kind of build his own quote unquote kingdom, if you could even call it that, where it's just like a fishing boat. So you can sense the Hobbit virtues of valuing the humble things in life, but because Smeagol's been corrupted, those Hobbit-like virtues have been distorted, which further feeds into Tolkien's beliefs and absolute truths here that evil doesn't create, it destroys. And notice how evil always distorts things. Like sex, for example, is a wonderful thing, but lust distorts it. Or that a clean car is good, but rust distorts it. A healthy body is a good thing, but cancer distorts it. You seeing the pattern here? What is the subspecies of hobbit for hobbits? If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Smeagol was some kind of subspecies for hobbits that lived like some like east of like the Misty Mountains. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that's where Smeagol lived. Well, there was the Goblin King next door. Callum is life denialist. Hey, everyone, come to life denialist! The Jetters need to not get after him! Nietzsche's words. So speaking of Nietzsche, the reason why it was funny to mention Wilhelm to Power was because me and Brooks found out that, what was it? I think it was Nietzsche's middle name, because lust is what makes us human. I suppose there is a human aspect to that, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily healthy. I was talking about the reason why I laughed at Wilhelm to Power is because Friedrich Nietzsche's middle name is actually Wilhelm. So obviously, if you're familiar with pop culture, the reason why Wilhelm is so funny is because Wilhelm has been unanimously attributed to this trope called the Wilhelm scream. Once you hear it, you never stop hearing it. Like Star Wars and like the Wild Western films, like I'm pretty sure it was like in Robin Hood or something. Like Indiana Jones, like it's one of those sound effects that you keep hearing, but it keeps being reused, and it's so funny to me and Brooks that the name associated with that sound effect is the middle name of this really crucial philosopher. So Wilhelm to power. Yeah, the tragedy Wilhelm Nietzsche. Übermensch. Ah! That's why it was funny. Although, now that you mention Nietzsche, I wonder how Nietzsche would apply to Dune. I suppose let's analyze Dune from a Nietzschean perspective, actually. Because Nietzsche was a person who was realizing the necessity for for order, the tragic Wilhelm. And Nietzsche tried to emphasize the necessity for this Übermensch figure. I wonder how Nietzsche would react to Dune. I wonder because a lot of Dune highly depends on this sort of religious belief in what is called the Orange Catholic Bible, which is a whole hodgepodge of different beliefs, like a mixture of Buddhism and Abrahamic beliefs. Love, the aesthetic ideal. Yeah, love, hate, the aesthetic ideal. Yeah, that would definitely come into play. And I suppose there's that geopolitical aspect that comes into play with the whole Dune series. So with that geopolitical power struggle, I think you could, from a Nietzschean perspective, perhaps you could see that as maybe the struggle to become the Übermensch. Of course, in Nietzschean terms, like life is Nietzsche believed that life was a never-ending series of struggles upon struggles upon struggles, and that life would inevitably repeat itself with the struggles. So from a Nietzschean perspective, the never-ending struggle for geopolitical power in Dune makes a lot of sense from a Nietzschean perspective. Because in the Dune series, according to Frank Herbert's perspective on things that he's inputted into this science fiction novel that he's made, which has now been adapted into a two-part film, is that according to Frank Herbert, and I guess according to Nietzsche in this case, everyone is trying to seek power, and everyone's end goal is to attain power. And according to Frank Herbert, there is a danger in getting too much power. And as I've said before in this live stream, I think Dune Part 2 absolutely nails the thematic of the danger of what too much geopolitical power does to you. And even without giving too much away, even when the film kind of ends off in, well, an inevitable kind of victory for the quote unquote good guys, there's still this implication of something being corrupted along the way, and this implication like there's more to come and stuff like that. In the words of Dio, humans cannot live without their desires. Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Goodbye, JoJo! Oh my day. Okay. Oh, congratulations, Brooks. Now you've got me thinking about if Dune was done in a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure style. Baron Harkonnen, I have one last thing to say to you. Nani? Nani? Nandayo! Or like Paul summons the or like trying to get through the shield or something. Things that come Oh man. Oh man. What else was there to talk about? Overcoming fears. Oh yeah, I suppose there's this one really inspiring thing that that Dune teaches. Like even though people would say it's not a very healthy thing to say that life's all about geopolitical power and that's the end of it. Well, I mean, keep in mind this is just Frank Herbert's opinion. You could make that as you will, but there is this one really healthy lesson that I've learned from the Dune franchise, which has been really helpful for mental health reasons. It's this phrase, I should not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Like, and that if I let this fear pass over me, only I will remain. You see, the thing about fear is that something I've learned in recent years is that fear is often, it's not really real. It's often just smoke and mirrors. So the best way to deal with fear is not to cause attention to it, because fear acts like a bully. And that goes back to the conversation I was having earlier with the person I mentioned, who I will not name. I noticed that the people that this person was talking about, they seem to be getting a lot of bullying because they react to the bullying, and because they reacted to some kind of threat, that gets the bully's attention. When the most practical way to handle a bully is to just dismiss them. Like, yeah, you're there. Who cares? That's the ideal way you need to deal with a bully. So the same applies to your mind. Like, so when you get an intrusive thought or some kind of fear, like reacting to, like, go away, go away, go away, go away, go away. Oh, that's going to cause that fear to grow and to grow and to grow and to grow and to grow like a parasite. It's just going to overwhelm you. But in reality, the best way to actually deal with the fear is just let it pass over your head. Just let it pass on through. I will not fear. I will not fear. This is a breakthrough, by the way. This is an absolute breakthrough. Because once you realize that a lot of the fear is just smoke and mirrors, you can just, okay, you're there, but just let it pass on by. It's a game changer. It's a genuine game changer. I mean, Dune wasn't like the primary inspiration, but I'm glad that that kind of teaching is in the Dune franchise, because that's a very important lesson to hand down to people. And so, with all that said and done, I think that's as good a time as any to wrap up what I wanted to say. So, to all of you who bothered to come into this live stream, thank you so much for watching. I think I'll be making like a review video of Dune Part 2 eventually. I think I'll be working on that next. But even if that doesn't come out, you got this live stream to refer to, and I've got something important to say. Pardon me. Had a nice dinner. Salmon and salad. Delicious. Right. So I'll just wrap up everything up, and I've got a friend to catch up with. I'm wrapping up. All right. So, if there's anything else you wanted to say about the Dune series, or anything you want to say about Interstellar, Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, or cinematic experiences, or anything like that, let me know down in the comments below. If there's anything you want to say regarding topics discussed in this live stream, please let me know. And thank you all so much for watching. Have a nice day. Scott Stinker signing out. See you later. Oh, also, for other live streams, I'm most likely going to get back on my PlayStation 5 and play more of Batman Arkham Knight. I intend to play more games like Metal Gear Solid 3 at some point, and I've seen that like Fall Guys has had an update of like a survival update, so that's got my attention because competition is a good thing. All right, my friend beckons me, and I'll just have to wrap this up right now. Okay, Scott Thinker signing out. Bye.